There you are.
Hello. How's it going? Wow, that was close, and we are live.
We are live, and I'm sorry about being a little bit late because I have just been having a morning this morning with all these new
Uh,
emails that have been
oh
popping
my
up from
gosh.
Jeffrey Epstein. So, I just basically rolled out of bed and started working. So I even look a little haggard, but there you go. I'm sorry. Here we are.
It doesn't show. And I was watching with you with Lev on your show or his earlier today. So, we scheduled this a couple weeks ago, and I was going to ask you about all of the Jeffrey Epstein and financial issues, but there's breaking news today. So first, welcome to Freedom Over Fascism Live.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, Stephanie. Great to meet your viewers and your followers. It's nice to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. I have to move over to be able to see our stream, so I can see our
I get it. So there's a lot of screens open on my page too. It gets very complicated when you're trying to manage all these cameras and feeds and things, but it's great. It takes a little time. Also, you've called me Zev Shalev, by the way, which I'm not Lev, I'm Zev, but it's okay.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
It happens all
I'm
the
so
time.
sorry.
Yeah, everyone, it happens all the time. So you're not alone, but it's...
No, I'll fix that as soon as I can.
Yeah, no problem. I just noticed that.
And I still can't find our
well, I can tell you we're live,
notes.
and there's a bunch of people here, and I'm just trying to make sure that I can monitor this without it leaking through here, because I think the audio is leaking through. But there you go. I can now see people are here.
Here we are. I see it now.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. So, guys, I'm so sorry that it's taking me a little bit of time. That was me, I think. And here we go. Maybe. I'm always embarrassed about not quite being ready to go, even when I'm supposed to be ready to go.
This is the joy of Substack. We are always all a little bit like caught up. And, there's something about the beauty of just doing it on the app, because people can just show up and it's just very natural. When you're trying to add graphics and layers and do all these other production elements, it's like playing a piano while singing at the same time in front of a giant audience. Things go wrong all the time. It's a little hard to people see. People can't see what you're seeing, which is a lot of buttons and screens and things. But it takes a little time to get used to doing. But what you're doing is television on your own. Normally it takes an entire control room and crews and staff of hundreds of people to get the stuff right. So the fact that you're doing it on your own is remarkable.
Well, I have to thank our good friend Nick Pero for helping me figure out this software. And now that I'm old, I don't do it as fast as I used to. I don't.
Why is that? Why does our brain slow down so much?
Our brains are no longer elastic like they used to be.
Is that the reason? I'm trying to figure out what it is that happens to our brains, but it certainly does. Things slow down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here we are today, having scheduled this for a couple of weeks, and we have big breaking news today. Mm-hmm. And let's see if I can get these captions to work properly. Show?
Oh. We just talk. Forget about it.
Okay, but I got to fix your name, damn it.
Oh, don't worry about it. It's all good. I can see my name is fine now.
No, your name is right here, but it was low. Okay. So now we've got a lower third. We've got Zev, we have Stephanie, and we have new emails that just came out today. And while I have been sort of hopping around and watching all sorts of lives and figuring this out, let's catch everybody up as to what happened in terms of these emails being released today and what they say and what the implications are about what they say.
Well, they're very significant. We've got 3 different emails today from Democrats in the Oversight Committee in the House. They have selected 3 emails. There's obviously a lot more that they're not sharing with us today, and that is interesting that they've chosen not to share the full thing. This is obviously a coordinated, staged release of information. The emails cover a period of time between 2011 and 2019, and they involve emails from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell and back, and to Michael Wolff, the author of the famous Trump trilogy, and also a friend of Jeffrey Epstein, or author about Jeffrey Epstein. There's 3 emails, 2 with Michael Wolff and 1 with Ghislaine Maxwell. And the timing of the emails are really interesting because they date back to the original exposure of Prince Andrew, the allegations around him and Virginia Giuffre. And you remember that photo famously taken in Ghislaine's home,
Right.
with Andrew, these arms, I think, around Virginia. That photograph is what preceded the first of these emails that came out, directly or after the emails happened after the first Mail of Sunday reported on this alleged affair that was happening between Virginia Giuffre, who was 17 at the time, and Prince Andrew. So that's the start of it. The second one involves Michael Wolff during the presidential primaries, the 2015 presidential primaries, when Donald Trump was just becoming the front runner in the 2015 presidential primaries, which of course he landed up winning. He landed up becoming president. And it's about how CNN was planning to ask him about this during the big debate that they were planning during those primaries. They never did, but you have context there between Michael Wolff and Jeffrey Epstein discussing what they should do in that event, which sounds to me a little bit like Epstein was using Michael Wolff as an intermediary between the Trump campaign and Epstein, which is also really interesting. A lot of questions.
Or he was just acting as sort of a PR manager.
Yeah, like one or the other.
The questions, yeah.
It's either PR managing, which is also sort of unusual for a journalist to be offering advice like that, but it's also unusual for a journalist to want to be intercepting interpreting what different options for Trump and for Epstein. It sounds to me a little bit like he was in touch with both. We know he was in touch with both because he often wrote about both. So that's an interesting conversation. And then the third one is probably the most shocking one, where Epstein suggests that maybe Donald Trump was the person who had turned him into the police. And then he also says that he knew about the girls in this particular case, meaning he knew about the operation that he and Ghislaine were running. And then he also talks about that time, which Trump has also revealed, that he asked Epstein and Ghislaine to, no longer steal his property from his Mar-a-Lago spa, which is just a horrific choice of words that Trump had, but also an indication of how his mind and Epstein's mind worked. But there's a lot here. There's 8 years of them discussing at different points how they were going to keep the conversation around Trump and Epstein out of the limelight, or perhaps how one was using it against the other. That's it's a very, very contentious 3 emails that are going to be scrutinized in a million ways. And I think that there's a lot more still to come out.
I'm sure there's a lot more still to come out. Somebody in the chat said that there was another drop. And it's so hard to keep track of.
There has been just now? Really? Since then?
Jim Acosta earlier had another 16-page drop during his live, apparently.
Okay, we'll check those out as well. What did those say? What are people saying is in those drops?
Here's a link. Let me see if I can open it up. So what we had so far was, all right, can I even share this? Let me just share this. Let's see if it tells us anything. I'm going to share my screen.
Amazing.
Maybe I want to share my screen. Unable to share the screen. Oh crap. Let's see.
If it's in here, let me see if I can pull it up.
Oh, here it is. Here it is.
This is also from Oversight Democrats.
Right. So let's put us somewhere where people can see our faces also, like this, maybe. Okay. So also being old means you can't read anything anymore. So we're looking at this one is an email that happened on my birthday in 2019. And I expect you all to know that is June 3rd. Talking about Prince Andrew and Trump. And it's not clear to me who is writing these. Oh, here we go. Jeffrey is writing to Kathy Brumler. Anyway, I don't want to go through and try to make sense of this.
Well, we can. We can. Let me just see if I've got them up here. Let me just take a quick look now.
Okay.
At what they're saying, because who is I'm sorry, I'm just having a minute here everything's so weird on my screen today. So we've got some message. Okay, so this
is 2018.
So let's go to the big one. It's I think he makes the argument that it was Trump's money, making it not illegal, though he also said he only found out afterwards and after the fact, and according to the indictment, was billed as services rendered and grossed up. I'm not quite sure what this is about. Are you right? You know what? Yes. If you keep asking me some questions about everything else, I will try do this while we're talking.
While we're talking, oh my goodness. Okay.
Because I can sometimes do that. Maybe not always, but I can try to do it because as we're developing an understanding of what this is all about.
So this morning, the way I'm thinking about it is last week, 2 weeks ago, Prince Andrew got stripped of his title. So we knew something big was going to be coming out, plus all of the stuff around the shutdown and the unwillingness of the House to let this stuff out, shutting down the government for as long as they could. Maybe still, I don't even know if they opened it again. And then the email that we saw this morning was Maxwell and Epstein talking about the fact that Trump was not mentioned in this string of emails. So apparently, I wrote notes very frantically as you were talking with Lev.
We can go through the initial emails that we got today, maybe the first three that we got earlier on.
Okay.
If those are the ones you want to discuss, because I've got so much open on my screen right now, I can't even navigate. But there were three significant emails there, and we can go through them. I just posted an account of this on my site. So
if I go to your site, it's there, and I can
but let me see if I can. Sorry about the. This is what breaking news looks like, I guess. Here we go. Desktop.
Let me see if I can allow you to screen share.
I don't know if I can screen share actually, because I've got so much open. I think it'll just be impossible to. But I have them here, and I can read them to you. So the first one is in 2011, and it's from GMAX, which is Ghislaine's account, and it's sent on the 2nd of April at 7:09 p.m., which is a Saturday night, and it's to Jeffrey Epstein and his known account, which is jevacation@gmail.com. Importance is high. She's responding to an email that he sent her earlier on that day at 2:25, and in that conversation, Jeffrey Epstein says, "I want you to realize that dog that hasn't barked is Trump, ... And then he says, a redacted name, victim, spent hours at my house with him, meaning Donald Trump, 2 commas. And then he says, he has never once been mentioned by police chief, etc. I'm 75% there. So he's saying to Ghislaine, I'm 75% sure that Donald Trump has been the person basically who reported me to the police and is involved in this investigation. He says that by saying that the victim or the survivor in this case, who had spent hours at Epstein's house with Donald Trump, has not been mentioned once, meaning that he has never been mentioned once by the same survivor. So there's a police investigation going on. It appears to Epstein that it's Donald Trump who is involved in that investigation or is cooperating with authorities because he says that that's the dog that hasn't barked, meaning, that's, well, I'm not sure the origins of that expression, but it sort of makes sense that that's what he's referring to in that email. So that's the first of the emails that arrives at 2011. And it's just shortly after the exposure of Andrew and his affair with Virginia Giuffre, or the entrapment that they put him through. So that's the first one.
So that's the first one. So Epstein is thinking that Trump's the one talking to
That's my read of it. Yeah, my read of it is that he is basically saying, how come Donald Trump's name has never come up in the investigation all this time? Because the police chief has not mentioned him or anything like that, and yet this victim spent hours with Donald Trump, but Donald Trump's name never comes up. Now, if you know a little bit about the history of Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump, this is a game that both of them played repeatedly in order to get out of trouble. They'd commit crimes, and then they'd help the police or authorities or prosecutors in getting the other guy so they would get off the hook. This happened with all the way in the early 80s when Donald Trump used to do this with the mob leaders in New York City. Epstein did it to Stephen Hoffenberg when Hoffenberg went to jail. There's indications that Epstein cooperated later in another case, which we're going to reveal in the next few weeks. So we got a situation where this is a very common tactic by these mob figures who cooperated with each other on occasion, made money with each other on occasion, but when it suited them, they had no problem turning against each other in order to get the one in jail while they stayed out of trouble. And clearly, this is a game that has meant, Donald Trump has often been mentioned as an FBI informant. That's what they mean by him being an informant. He has cooperated in many times to get himself out of trouble in order to get his fellow criminals incriminated and convicted. So that's what my read, as is obviously extrapolating a lot out of this one email, but that's my guess of what would have happened in this situation.
Right. And him, cooperating with the feds was probably with an agreement that his name would stay out of it.
Yeah, these things are always that.
Yeah.
These things are always like that. They cooperate. They basically, I think they're a terrible thing in the justice system, that we allow people off the hook if they basically, turn evidence against the other person, because they're all involved. They should all go to jail. We shouldn't be allowing people off because, they're turning on this one or that one's turning on that one. You got conspiracies here, big criminal conspiracies, and we can't, we just have to be able to prosecute everybody on the evidence we have. We shouldn't have to need to go to them turning on each other.
No, but that's how often how you go from, low in an organization to higher to get the biggest people. But the fact that they're all doing this to each other is probably part of what makes the whole enterprise so scintillating to them, because there's that element of danger that they never know when their co-conspirators are going to rat them out.
Yeah, I mean, this is the case. I think what we've seen is people get away with crimes, people like Donald Trump getting away with crimes for decades, and rising to this place where they not only are it's not only the president of the United States, he's been able to do it on the back of calling himself an FBI informant, on ratting on his, ratting is not the term I'd use, of course, but on telling on his fellow criminals. He's gotten himself out of power and out of prison and into power through this strategy. And of course, they've got corrupt people involved inside the prosecutor's office. A lot of the time, you think about the role of Rudy Giuliani, you think about the role of Pam Bondi right now. Mm-hmm. These people are also compromised that they land up acting as part of the conspiracy themselves.
Right. But, what's interesting to me is, so they've been committing crimes for all of this time. At the same time, we have been finding out about whatever relationship that Trump has had with Putin and Russia. And so at the same time that he's speaking against Epstein and other people in the conspiracy, he's being groomed to provide something to a foreign leader and then helped to power through that. And you've been talking about how Jeffrey Epstein, Les Wexner, and two other guys have been up to their eyeballs in financial crimes, shall we say. How, I know can you talk a little bit about that? And then if there's any way to put together those pieces, or if it's just too early in what we know?
Well, this is a story I've been working on for almost a decade now. Really, it's the story of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, not as the sex trafficking thing, not as the as parts of the sex trafficking and human trafficking operation, but as part of a much bigger network, a network that was involved in financial crimes that are so big. They've basically brought America to its knees. Financial crimes that have taken as much as $79 trillion, according to the Rand Institute now, out of the American economy since it all began. And you can trace the origins of this in 1987, which is when we had that 1987 crash. And then what followed was the SNL crisis that followed after that. And it continued every time we had a financial collapse. You think about 9/11, you think about COVID, you think about what happened in 2008, and the latest part of the Greatest Heist. Sorry, it takes a deep look inside the 2008 time period and explores Jeffrey Epstein's role, particularly during that time, and what he did in the financial criminal side. He's the big stuff. The financial crimes is what they were doing, was the big stuff. That this other stuff was just cover story and blackmail and a way for them to maneuver their way through the system and not get caught. But the big crimes is all about stealing billions and billions of dollars. And they would do it by playing the market, by rugging the market, by crashing the economy, and then stealing the bailout money on the other side, and then picking up all the distressed assets at pennies on the dollar and becoming these even richer, more successful, bigger names in business. And what we uncover in the Greatest Heist is that it's not only Jeffrey Epstein and his network, but it's also the banks, people like Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan that were intimately involved in not only the collapse, but in the recovery from that collapse, and also in financing all these operations, whether it's the human trafficking operation, all this money laundering operation. They were at the heart of it. It's very distressing as someone who's been researching this for a very long time. The evidence is overwhelming, but it's also very hard to believe that people could be so callous and so cruel to a country that's actually given them so much.
Well, I think anybody who's willing to both steal trillions of dollars multiple times out of an economy and rape children is probably not gonna have some sort of crisis of conscience about any of the things that they're doing. So let me just play back what I just heard you say. So starting in 1987 with the stock market crash in 87 and going through when the economy kind of collapsed after 9/11, the 2008 financial crisis, and the financial kind of collapse around COVID. Did I hear you say that basically Epstein and Wexner and JP Morgan were behind, in the SNL savings and loan crisis, that they were behind all of those things?
Well, I can tell you, this is about the 2008 in particular, where we see that Epstein is rising. Epstein was involved, actually, I believe, in the collapse of Drexel and Burnham, which is a company back in the 80s, which was involved in the SNL crisis. This was the His name's escaping me right now, but it'll come. Michael Milken was the guy who was ultimately sent to jail for a lot of those bad mortgage, junk bonds that they had back then in the 1980s. That was primarily in the sort of office market, the commercial market of real estate. The same thing was then applied heading into 2008 when they were giving, ridiculously low mortgages, over leveraged in the 2000s. They just got rid of the Glass-Steagall Act in late 90s, and the 2000s were a boom time where they were just giving away money left, right, and center. We saw this hugely inflated real estate market, which was backed again by these junk bonds or these mortgage-backed securities that had no real backing. They were just basically giving people money to buy their homes. Well, that collapsed in 2008, obviously quite spectacularly. It was just as Barack Obama was becoming president of the United States. He was handed this huge crisis, and they were the ones who, as we'll show in later episodes, and I don't want to give away the story here because it's a bit of a spoiler if I do, but they were the ones who did this. Epstein was the one who collapsed it. Jamie Dimon was the one who was there to pick up the pieces. And Epstein was the number one client at JP Morgan Private Wealth. He was intimately involved in a lot of their senior management and their executives' lives. He was constant communication with Mary Erdoes and Jess Staley, his best friend at the time. So it's a very long, intricate, and highly researched endeavor that I'm putting out here, and I've only done part one. But as you those people who read the book, and I encourage everyone to subscribe to it and read it, you will see how they did it. And it is a caper, it is a heist, it is in some ways, you think of like an Ocean's 11. It's that kind of thing that they're doing, and for them, there must have been some sort of high points and some sort of excitement out of doing all of this. But of course, the number of victims and the tragedy of what happened to America in the face of all of that is so obvious, and so I can't think of what it would feel like to know that all of this was constructed. People who lost their homes, people who lost their life savings, people who never recovered, and there are so many. I'm sure people watching right now who just lost everything. And imagine that in the context of knowing that these guys were getting richer. These guys were trafficking all these young girls and living this crazy, immoral, debauched lifestyle while excavating all this money, extracting all this money from the American economy, and ultimately giving it away to foreign interests and to their own enrichment. It's just you can't think of anything worse than that, except for the guy then becomes president of the United States, which is even more horrific. And then they're involved in another version of all of this, I believe, right now. With cryptocurrency, and that's sort of the next layer that is beginning to emerge.
So every time people talk about cryptocurrency, I kind of nod and smile, and I pretend like I know what they're talking about, because currency itself is kind of a mirage. It has value because we think it has value. But can you just give me a very super quick primer on crypto and why it's important at this point in terms of the stealing of money and the collapsing of the economy?
Well, it's really yeah, I can give you as best I can. It is a very complicated subject, Stephanie, but I'm going to do my best. The crypto is basically used by criminals. Around the world. It's a great way for people who sell drugs, who launder money, who want to move money in a secret way. They love this stuff. They don't have to report it to banks. They're unregulated. They can just move millions, billions of dollars around the world. So that is its use case in a lot of times. I mean, other people use it as well now, but primarily it was firstly adopted by criminals, which already gives an indication of where the original base is. Now, Bitcoin is also a limited supply thing, especially Bitcoin itself, not all cryptocurrency, but Bitcoin has a limited supply. So those people who got in early, which includes those very same criminals who are using it early, own more of it, so they can stand to profit more of it because they have it. The price has gone up so much, people can't get in at this level. So when it keeps climbing, as it has been almost until recently, it's an indication for people that these criminals are getting richer and richer and richer off the back of this currency that was created basically for them. So it's not a good thing. There's no people who own crypto and own Bitcoin might say, well, it's making me a lot of money. And there may be very good people who own it, but the majority of the people are a very small handful of people. And I would not be surprised if they were the same people involved in 2008, the same people involved in 1987. It's that same small group of people that hold crypto. And who's going to make the most money off crypto right now is the president of the United States, who stands to make $10 billion of crypto. So, at its face of it, it's just not a good thing. But what he is trying to do to the American economy is absolutely collapse the US dollar so they could replace the US dollar with crypto US dollars. Now there's a bunch of stable coins out there that are pegged to the US dollar. And when the local currencies of countries like Argentina collapse, it's stable coins that become the alternative. Now it's unknown what will happen if the U.S. dollar collapses and crypto stable coins become the alternative. Are they going to be stable on their own without the U.S. dollar pegging? And is that something that they can actually achieve? That seems to be their plan: is to replace traditional U.S. dollars with crypto U.S. dollars. That's not a good thing, ultimately. And I may not know the specifics of how that all operates because I won't pretend to know how crypto really will play out. But I know
so
that
far I haven't found anybody who does.
Yeah, but the U.S. dollar is in very grave danger. That's why the tariffs were implemented in order to hurt the U.S. dollar. They wanted foreign countries and to drop the U.S. dollar reserves. They wanted U.S. dollars to be dumped across the market. That's why he's being so cruel to the economy. He's actually trying to starve the economy so he could replace it with crypto once it collapses. I mean, I think that's the real plan here. But I'm saying that not because I have proof that they're doing it right now, but when you look at all these things that they did from 1987 to 2008, it's all the same thing, about over leveraging, about pushing and extracting money out of the market. And they did it as well, by the way. With the other day when they're offering people 50-year mortgages for their homes. I mean, it's 20 years longer than we can right now for, who benefits from that? Only the banks, only the loan sharks, not the average homeowner who'll never own their home because they only buy their homes typically now at 40, and most people don't live to 90. So it's just a scam that they keep doing over and over and over again to Americans, and I hope Americans are wise enough to rise up to it now and stop it. These guys should all be in jail.
Clearly. In this, I'm going to go back in the chat just for a second because things, I guess, have been happening since we've been on.
Yeah.
That Trump just called an emergency meeting to try and stop the Epstein files from being public. And then somebody else said that there's an emergency meeting with Jamie Dimon and other financial.
Yeah, this was announced. This was announced this morning, and I was quite stunned. This is just days after I put out only part one of this investigation. And right. Jamie Dimon, who's a figure in this investigation, a serious figure in this investigation that I'm putting out. I may even put out part two earlier on because I think they know what I'm about to reveal, and what they're going to find out is that Jamie Dimon was, heavily involved in the collapse of 2008, and he's been heavily involved with the Trump administration in supporting all these policies because he's been connected to the same network. And so, you see that he and a bunch of other Wall Street people are showing up tonight at the White House suggests to me that they're aware that their plan is becoming is unraveling, and part of it is the Epstein exposure, but not only on the women, which is what most of people's attention on the Epstein files is about, the human trafficking. It's about the girls. There is another side to that is really, really, really big, and that's the financial crimes I'm talking about here. When you think about all the wealth of America, when you think about the collapse of the American dollar, when you think about the dreams and hopes and homes of millions of Americans, now that is not something I think people are ready for, to see that happen and to see that the president of the United States was involved in that.
Well, in some ways, it's too big to really even wrap your mind around. It's like you know, when they say like one person is a tragedy and thousands or millions or statistics, like that much money and that many people forced out of their homes and their life savings gone and their lives ruined. It's really hard to get your mind around the fact that that it was, it was engineered. I mean,
that was the plan. They had a plan to do this, and they executed that plan. And it is, they always say white collar crimes have no victims. That there are no real victims, and they are real victims. There's people who, from the entire 2008 buildup, the all these mortgages that people were given based on fraud. I mean, there was just fraud behind it. There was no real mortgage available. Sometimes these mortgages weren't even issued. They were just being foreclosed on. They were just, it was just a massive amount of horrible behavior by the banks and these loan sharks that were at the time offering what was called liar's loans. It's the artificial inflation of a market, and then the collapse of it, and then basically, like every pump and dump or rugging, as they call it in the business, it happens a lot in the stock market. They run up a stock and then they dump it, and they've done it with crypto a number of times. You've seen Trump do it in the White House using tariffs and other things. They play the market in order to gain some money, and then before it collapses. And this happens over and over again. But they did this with people's homes and lives, and now they're doing it with the entire American economy. And they just seem to, the hubris is kind of it's just unbelievable that they think they can do this, over and over again.
I mean,
until they get caught.
Until they get caught, but they haven't been yet, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you've uncovered it, but right now the Department of Justice is beholden to Trump. So who's going to arrest them? Who's going to hold them accountable?
Well, the people have to. The people have to. This is still a democracy. This is still a country where the people have a right to elect a government that represents them and reflects their desires and needs. And if they aren't doing it, they also have the right to turf them. And so whether it happens in the next elections or whether it happens before then, and I believe that there's going to be a lot of momentum in the near future to make sure that it even happens before, I think we have to understand that there is a this has been a corruption that is so deep rooted in our system, and the people have to be what roots it out. And in some ways, Jeffrey Epstein's death and Jeffrey Epstein's emails here and the files of Jeffrey Epstein are going to be the thing that ultimately, I believe, cracks this open. And in some ways as well, if we're learning what we are learning here, that Donald Trump was the person who maybe even instigated some of these investigations, there's an irony in that is quite good to behold, because at least that their own actions are going to be the thing that brings them down. We've heard that Trump is wandering around the White House whispering Epstein's name all the time because I bet you he can't believe that this is the thing. This is the thing that's going to crush him. And it doesn't surprise me that they're having meetings today. And that they're going to try stop the files. Also, I will say, these latest batch of emails that I've been trying to read through as we've been talking here a little bit involve other people. Involve Steve Bannon, who just the other day was talking about it. Everyone, the Democrats, when they're all going to jail, they have awareness inside the network of people that surround Donald Trump that they're all going to jail. They're all criminals. They know it. They know what they've done. And in fact, this is, that kind of knowledge and forbearance seems to be borne out by these new emails as well that include people like Trump and Michael Wolff. I mean, he's going to come up for a lot of scrutiny here. I just spoke to him last week, and I was kind of surprised when he said to me, I asked him a couple of questions, which are sort of leading questions because I was curious about the answers. I said, did he know any times that Trump and Epstein were in business together? Because I hadn't read that in his books, but I had uncovered it in the original Greatest Heist. I found lots of evidence of that. And he said, yes, well, they were. And I was like, I didn't push him on that because he was my first time meeting him, and I was like, "Well, you didn't tell this before. You didn't tell us before that that Trump and Epstein had figured out a way to get him out of bankruptcy, Trump out of bankruptcy in the '90s. You didn't tell us that before." So, I was stunned by that answer, and then I was surprised by the way he framed the photos that apparently Epstein has locked away in his safe that he showed Michael Wolff of Donald Trump with these young girls and the stain and all of that. He didn't seem to think that they were so damaging, even though he says that that's what they showed. And I thought that was really interesting that he sort of was so in their world, maybe, that he didn't quite differentiate or realize how horrible their actions were, which I have sensed in all these communications, in all the birthday book and all the stuff. There was so much acceptance that this was okay. This is how you did things. You sold girls. All this kind of just treating girls as property, as nothing. I just felt like that's the way it's been in their world.
Well, they have never really, well, I guess Epstein has more or less paid for his crimes, but they haven't been held accountable ever. And a lot of, American history is replete with all sorts of corrupt people who never had to pay for their crimes, and the entire Confederacy never had to, be held accountable for revolting against the Union. Like, we have a very long habit of not holding people accountable.
Yeah. We tend to fix things by pouring more money into the situation, but we don't really put the people who were responsible behind bars. We failed to do that in 2008, and and that's a mistake. That was a mistake. In 1987, we put thousands of bankers in jail. In 2008, we did nothing. We basically gave them a bailout. We gave them about $700 billion, which maybe even expanded to as much as 40 trillion by the time it was all accounted for. It's so much money that was poured into these banks and given to these people. It's,
and then just a few of these people that they took the money and just.
Foreign governments would pick up the money afterwards. The bailouts went to the banks. These guys got spectacularly rich. We didn't know many billionaires and trillionaires back then. And, we might be getting our first trillionaire now. This kind of inflation of these certain individuals, that only a handful or a small group of people have the money in America. Most Americans have gotten poorer. A very small group of them have gotten richer, and richer to the point where they're spectacularly wealthy, and many people can't own homes. The average person cannot afford to buy a home in America anymore. That is just a sad reality, and it's because of these actions, because these people have been stealing and conning and and lying, defrauding Americans all the way for years now.
That is a big thing to really wrap your head around. That, we know that the wealth, it all fits together, right? We know the wealth is concentrated in 900 billionaires. Probably the top 5 have most of, the ones that the Musk and Ellison and
Zuckerberg's, yeah. And Bezos.
And Bezos, yeah. So there's that oligarchy, and yet people can't afford homes. So we know that there's this massive transfer of wealth up, and all of these policies since Reagan have facilitated that. And yet it's still really hard to get the vast majority of people to pay attention or even believe, maybe because it's too fantastical. But as you said, this is still a democracy. The people need to rise up, but most people don't want to think about politics because they're scared.
And they're poor. And a lot of people are left thinking about, how am I going to make ends meet? They're taking away my health care. They're taking away my SNAP. They're taking away my ability to survive. I mean, they have put people into a state of trauma since Donald Trump was first elected that is so, it's so pervasive. None of us really know what to do. Um, and yet, this is the opportunity we've all been waiting for. And it may not seem like it because it may seem fantastical or whatever it is, but everyone knows the situations. You ask your average 30-something-year-old if they can afford a home in America. They cannot afford a home in America. How did that happen? Why did that happen? Where did all this wealth and money go from the most prosperous country in the world, the most unbelievably richest country in the world? Why is America and Americans not able to afford homes?
Right. Well, I mean, so many things. And the only reason they could afford them, say in the 50s, was the GI Bill for the most part. And that was only for white veterans.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the creation of the middle class. And it's kind of gone downhill from there. But, I think unless you got really, really lucky or had really wealthy parents or got into real estate at like a time when it was still reasonably affordable, I would never have been able to buy a house. But luckily, my husband bought a condo when he was in his 20s. When like the thought, my parents were like, "You need to buy a house," and I was like, "What? I'm 25. What are you talking about?" But so many people didn't and can't, and
I did,
because
and I sold out and I could never get back in the market just afterwards. So,
right,
and the thing that happened is the affordability got it so out of whack because they pumped the market up so high during 1987 with these junk bonds and these, fake loans. And the way to cover that is to obviously do what they're trying to do now: extend affordability, do the quantitative easing, spend even more money from the Federal Reserve in order to pump the market full of dollars that aren't really there. You just land up. It's just you become further and further able to afford the mortgages, to afford buying these homes because the prices are so out of whack. They keep going higher while people's affordability is just impossible. People can't afford homes now at all. The gap between buyers and sellers is so huge. It's the largest it's been in history. We could be facing another one of those crashes soon. And I'm not an economist, so I don't really know. But and the other thing is, someone saying on the chat here, which is so important, the Glass-Steagall Act, which was instituted in post Depression. I think maybe not post Depression. Maybe I'm not entirely sure, but was basically disbanded by Clinton in 1999. I mean, there's a bunch of people that did it, but that was one of the things that protected consumers, that protected the banks, because it stopped banks from being investment houses. And after Glass-Steagall, they just became one big sort of speculative market, and that hurts people a lot in the 2000s. But it's the fault of everybody's to think that politicians were so corrupted. Jeffrey Epstein as well, close to Bill Clinton, by the way. That's an interesting thought when you think
oh
about the
yeah, I
Glass-Steagall
know.
Act. It's just a lot to unwrap there. But it is hard for. I know when you say it's too fantastical to believe, it is. It took me. I mean, when I first realized this, it took me months to even consider that it's even a possibility. I thought it was so ludicrous that this thing could be such a huge conspiracy. And over the years, I've just kept collecting evidence, and it just occurred to me this year that I was like, it's actually that they did. It is actually what they did, and the evidence came in this discovery of this offshore holding, which Jeffrey Epstein was the chairman of in 2000 up until 2007, and how that was a pretty good indicator of what was about to come next, that the collapse of the market was going to have collapse, because that offshore holding held $6.7 billion in mortgage-backed securities, which they couldn't pay for.
Right. And so you're familiar with all of these economic and financial, I think a lot of us got some of the vocabulary in the last 15 years, the mortgage-backed securities and junk bonds, but I'm not sure that most of us know what that means, except for the fact that the vast majority of people are getting screwed.
The reason the market collapsed in 2008 is because of the Glass-Steagall Act and because of other loosening up of regulations. Suddenly, banks, they were forced to have a certain amount of actual equity in order to loan something out. Like it was 1 to 10 or something like that, in terms of dollars that they could loan to people. Then they expanded that to 1 to 40. In the case of this offshore holding that Jeffrey Epstein managed, it was 1 to 180. In other words, they had basically it was bankrupt. They were just giving money out to people. So there's just it was a vehicle that they could just. It's fine when the market keeps going up. It's all good when the market keeps going up. The minute it starts to crash, it crashes spectacularly because there's no foundation to it. So whenever we see these bull rallies and we see these balloons, these bubbles in the marketplace, it's oftentimes that they're based on nothing. They're just based on the momentum of the market. And when that underpinning collapses, there isn't anything to back it up with. They just never had the money in the first place. It was all just, smoke and mirrors. Right. And these guys realized that a long time ago, but they sell when it's high. They get their money out when it's high. And everybody else is stuck with the bill at the end. And that's generally the American taxpayer.
Right. And I mean, the reason is that they get out when it's high. And then that's kind of the reason that it drops, they precipitate. Right. And then, right.
Yes, which is something else in the Greatest Heist. We show you exactly what Jeffrey Epstein did to collapse the market and the actual steps he took to make that happen. And then the I don't want to give it away because it's quite spectacular what happens later. I'm going to try to accelerate the release of all of this so at least people can start getting it. But I don't want to ruin the story as much as it's real life and as much as it's important for everyone to know the story. I also think it's good for people to sort of come along the journey a little bit here because it's so much to take in. It took me years to even fathom it. And I'm trying to build a groundwork where people can really see how, oh yeah, well, these are these 4 characters that got together in Ohio in the 90s. And isn't it strange that they got together in Ohio in the 90s? And how come they're all connected? How come Wexner and Epstein and Kessler and Diamond are all connected to each other in Columbus, Ohio? What are the chances? What are the chances?
I mean, right. And there's, for me, like, part of the reason it's hard for me to wrap my head around is that for a long, long time, there have always been these conspiracy theories about a small group of people controlling the world's economy. And that has been fake.
Which means,
it's okay. So like the protocols of the elders of Zion saying that the Jews, and I hate, sort of ruled the world economy, made up. And so anything that even smacks of that makes me like just tense up, like, because it's not supposed to be that way. But then you see this group of 4 or 5 people who do manage to extract a tremendous amount of wealth and control the trajectory of major world economies from Columbus, Ohio. And it's kind of, for me, it's a little bit of a mind fuck because I spent a lot of time trying to tell myself, no, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Right. And yet maybe it does.
I mean, I've struggled with this. I was born in Israel. I'm Jewish. Obviously, it's heartbreaking to realize the reality that some fellow Jews are doing terrible things, and also are holding the rest of us hostage to those terrible things. This rising tide of anti-Semitism that is actually being amplified by Elon Musk, who's a friend of Bibi Netanyahu's. Why is that happening? Why is anti-Semitism rising through the social media mechanism that's supposed to be friends with the Israeli prime minister and supportive of Israel? They're amplifying the anti-Semitism because they want to keep the rest of us hostage in their deeply dark plan to manipulate the world economy, because they fear American Jewry a lot, because there are so many prominent, successful American Jews who are not supportive and not involved in anything like this. They're on the other side of this, that are involved in a much more centrist, maybe left of centrist kind of view of the world, that are very progressive in some ways. The many American Jews, that's where they fit into. They don't fit into this Russian view of Jewry, the sort of, which is, underpinning all of this, which is this mob that basically is this Russian Israeli mob that has spread its way from the collapse of the Soviet Union into America. Um, and that we need as much clarity to this thing as possible, because there is a rising tide of anti-Semitism. You see the Fuentes and the rise of Groypers and this anti-Semitism that is very fervent in the MAGA youth right now, and
Right.
we need to be very clear about what that means and what they're trying to do. They're trying to make American Jews hostage to the crimes of a small minority of really not good people who have ties to these mob figures, these organized criminal figures in Russia and in Israel that have captured both of those countries too. That are also captured in those countries.
Right. I mean, I'm going to have a couple of different conversations coming up about, a lot of this stuff and the cracks within the Jewish community and how horrible it is to be Jewish. I mean, I am too, and see all these horrible people. And, sometimes Christians will say, oh, well, those Christian nationalists, they're not really Christian, which I always thought was a pile of crap, because they are. And you kind of have to acknowledge the fact that the people that you don't want to be bad guys are actually bad guys.
Yeah. Extremists everywhere, and they're
right.
Extreme criminals and extreme bad people everywhere. And I think it's beholden on American Jews to really start speaking out against these criminals that are doing terrible things and have done terrible things. And the silence is not helpful. The silence around it is the thing that is going to make this anti-Semitism very, very deep rooted. And if terrible things have been done to Americans, which they have, then we need to fight and expose those just as clearly as we can, and as we would against any horror around the world. I mean, Jews are notorious for speaking out against injustice around the world. Not notorious, but are famous for speaking out against injustice around the world. We should be doing that even more so when there's injustice within our own community and being done to people that we live among. I think it's difficult. It's a conversation none of us want to have. Frankly, it makes me tear up because I love Israel so much, but it's one of those things that we have to fight against, because if we don't expose it, we just become complicit in these crimes, and I don't want to be that.
Exactly. Well, I've spent a whole lot of time in Israel. I haven't been there in a while, but like understanding that the thing that you love is not the actual thing that exists anymore, but separating the people from the government, from the crimes, it's a, and in the last 5 minutes we get here, but it's a big, sad, mind-bending moral conundrum that we have to, I think, face.
Israel was never meant to be this, and Judaism is not about this, and you and I know that.
Right.
We understand that the core teachings are not about this, and a few very unscrupulous people have done some terrible things, and they've also controlled Israel for a long time. And I understand maybe out of the Holocaust, there was a deep desire to do absolutely anything to stop anything like this from happening again, and you would grab power wherever you wanted to. Maybe that made sense for a few years, but I think as this generation of Jews reconciles their history and understands that some terrible things were done on their behalf and have been done recently in Israel, I mean, that horror in Gaza is unspeakable. And we need to, my opinion, it's the only thing we can do is speak out against it. It's the only thing we can do, and expose it as much as possible. I know that I put my life at risk when I started covering the story, and I've faced enormous hardship all the way through. because these guys have tried to shut me down so many times for everything I've been reporting, which included exposing, Jeffrey Epstein as an agent of Israel in 2019, which, was taken very seriously by a lot of people, and I suffered a lot because of that. They've been trying to shut me down, but what choice do we have? What choice do we have? We have to put the stuff out. If we don't put stuff out, we just become part of it.
Right, complicit.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I always end up, finishing up conversations on very, very low notes.
You made me cry, which really happens. So.
Maybe that'll be my claim to fame, is being able to make people cry. So let's wrap this up in a way that we can gain some perspective back, which is that the truth is coming out. Mm-hmm. And it's up to us, you and me, us in this community of Muslims, Jews, and Christians all believe in Jesus. I'm sorry. No. But anyway, it's up to us in this Substack community, in the larger pro-freedom community, in the larger, values-based community, to get the word out and to bring people together in order to fight it. And that's what I think you're doing. That's what I'm trying to do. And I think 727 people in here with us are on board with that. That's why they're here. And so I think that you are doing unbelievable, tremendous, amazing work at such personal cost. And I really commend you for it, because it's hard. And you've actually been doing I just sit here and talk, interview people.
Yeah.
But you've been really digging deep. And I'm really in awe.
Thank you so much for saying that. And I just want to echo what you were saying, that, a lot of people aren't paying attention to these financial crimes, and a lot of people aren't or even aware of them. They seem like, they have done a remarkable job of trying to suppress this reporting and suppress my reputation and hurt my reputation. And that has changed recently through these incredible people on Substack who have allowed my voice to rise again. And I'm so thankful for all of that. I'm so thankful for what you do, and I'm so thankful for the support you're giving me. And someone just asked me on the chat, why isn't Jim Acosta talking about the financial crimes? It beats me why they're not talking about it. It's not like they're not aware of it. They're aware of it. We just had reporting this week that in 2007, the same prosecutor who was going after these crimes, these sex crimes, was investigating financial crimes, and that was shut down by Acosta at that time in that plea agreement. So there was evidence then, there is evidence now, there is a ton of evidence throughout the last 50 years. And, the newspaper owners are complicit, and the people who trash my name in these circles are also complicit. But the story is there for anyone to see. And if you just do a little bit of digging, you can see the financial crimes, and you can see that these people are way wealthier than average Americans. And then where did this guy get his money from?
Right. I mean, all of a sudden, he got all that money.
A math teacher, at best, he got fired from his first job at Bear Stearns. He's a college dropout. Somehow became a billionaire, almost a billionaire. He lied about that too. How did $1 billion of money go through his bank accounts? How? Whose money was that? Well, it's not hard to figure out.
Ours, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for everybody here, if you're not already subscribed to Zev, a paid subscription, do it now. I can put up the QR code, I think.
Oh.
But because I'm essentially using Nick has let me use here we go.
You've done a good job with all this fancy button pushing. And Stephanie, it's just so nice to talk to you, and I hope all my followers follow you and subscribe to you. This platform is so amazing that we're able to share our followers with each other, that we're able to have these conversations. I've never met you in person, yet I feel like I know you, and to be able to connect with you and your expertise. People should know you're a historian, and tell people a little bit, what you don't mind. Tell my audience about yourself. I know we're taking a little longer than we should have, but tell people about where your history is, so they can know why they should follow you.
Okay, so I am a historian. I've been working in advocacy. First, I worked in higher ed, and then I worked in advocacy and interviewing people for a long time now. And I'm really interested in building community and putting context around all of the things that we're experiencing right now. And I think one of the things that I try to do is both talk to people who are well known, but I want to try to lift up voices that people don't know, but also get to the bottom of some of these societal issues. Why are we here? What has happened in history to make it so? Why is it so problematic? I believe that hope is a series of actions and not a state of mind. So the more that I can help people understand how they can help, how they can speak differently to help, is why I'm doing this. And interestingly, my degree, my PhD, is in Middle Eastern studies and not in American studies. And I spent the better part of a couple of decades working on Israeli-Palestinian peace and coexistence. And then life happened, and now I'm back in kind of focusing on the American side. But I truly, I love this country, and it makes me so sad that that this is happening. So I'm trying my best to counter it as much as possible.
Yeah, it's so interesting that your history is in the Middle East, because so much of this comes out of the Middle East and the Middle East conflict, and so your knowledge and experience there is going to be invaluable as you channel it through this effort you're doing to save this country. And your love for this country comes through in everything you're saying. And I think people, we should all be showing that love, and by defending the democracy that we live in and protecting it as much as possible. I want to thank you so much, Stephanie. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you for coming on. And just want to say that if you become a paid subscriber, I'm going to be doing weekly Zooms with my paid subscribers for coffee on a Sunday morning. So I'll get you more information about that. And you should definitely be a paid subscriber of Zev's, because my words are not wording well, because you have done such incredible work, and that's how you find out the truth.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I hate to ask people for paid subscriptions. I really do.
I feel
there is only one way. There's only one way to survive, and this has been a decades-long journey, and at some point, I'm sure I'll release all of these things as free. But for right now, as this journey unfolds, it is paid. But for every story, by the way, almost 60% of it is free. I try to give as much information as possible, and then we do all these live shows and summaries as well. So you don't have to be a paid subscriber to really get the full sense of the greatest heist. You'll find the story in other ways as well.
Right. I know it's hard when people are starving to ask for money, but on the other hand, we need to make a living too. Well, thank you. And thank all of you for being here. And I'll hopefully see you guys soon. And somebody else wants you to promote yourself again. So do that really quickly and tell people where to find you, and then we'll let people go.
So it's narativ.org, Narativ.org. It's a weird spelling of narrative. And it's .org. So, it's hard for people to find it. Otherwise, you can look for me on Substack under my name, Zev Shalev. Hard to spell too, Z-E-V. Last name is Shalev, S-H-A-L-E-V. And we do the 5-stack with Dean Blundell every day at 3:00. I'm not sure if there'll be one today because he's traveling, but maybe there will be. I do the Trump tyranny trackers on Tuesdays and Thursdays with Olga Lautman, where we track all the aggressive moves by this regime. And I do lots of special investigations like the one we're doing right now, which is called The Greatest Heist, which is all about Trump and Epstein and how they colluded on financial crimes. And the backstory as well for The Greatest Heist 1 is out already, and you can find that on the same site. And it looks at how Trump and Russia were co-opted by Trump and Epstein were co-opted by Russia back in the 80s, and how all of this started. So it's a long history, but you can find it all on Narativ.
History, so much more to get into.
Yeah.
All right, take care,
Thanks,
guys.
Stephanie.
Thank you for being here. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.